Oh, I'm in the last couple of minutes of my day. I discovered in the course of the night just how quickly you can move along, and how well I was um, packing and loading with a Doctor Who marathon playing on the television. Um, and by the time I looked up, I had quite a lot done. So I'm quite tired, and I'm heading to bed soon. But it occurred to me, this came to mind from some back and forth, and pleasant back and forth in comments on a recent video of mine. And but it occurred to me that I haven't done a poetry video in a very long time, and this my second book, which I know I've done a terrible job of promoting, but I've been kind of busy, you know. I've been kind of busy. Um, there is a poem in this one that directly pertains to things that have been talked about of late. Um, and two poems, kind of the bookend poems um, for the collection. And if I can squeeze both of them in before I hit the 15-minute limit on quick cap, then I'm going to give it a shot. But yeah, pardon me a moment. The first poem is on ships of dead men's nails. Late in the last of October's warm nights, heavy with autumn and whispering cold, an actor and I and miles of sidewalk, walking as myth-makers deep in our cups, our footfalls anarchic, tympanous taps. He pantomimes dozens as living craft, men made for hatred or played to be loved, shadows cast rougher than cracks in concrete, fantasies falling on women and men, how one ought to live in life's energies, carried to bliss or reflections of calm, though often engulfed by simplest grief, easiest state to sustain being moved. The phantoms, the artist says he pretends, dream people living their interesting lives. But I, he whispers, unheard and unknown, have seen corridors few people have walked, read the lies written on bellies of stones, like bright river gold that calls men to drown, a curse in its light to sear heart it calls. That being unseen I am everywhere, casting soft shadows, the figure unseen. The dark cellar stares mysterious chill, giddiness marring as distant Apollo. Brighten the colors wherever I am, and absent leave tokens of meaningful gloom. For true sun gods too cast shadows and light. Apollo's long shadow is lightness itself, while Ahura Mazda cast his dark twin. As storied creatures before the TV, before sidewalks, our language, our actors, peeking a moment from their musty burrows, catch sight of a man, and by the old laws, compelled to give mortals treasure to keep. My only gold is peculiar thoughts, stories to illumine secrets of earth, stairwells in the forest covered in glyphs, beguiling trickery of fairy gifts. I've wondered why Fae would lay glamoured snares, cups ever filling with decades of sleep, bride's promise broken by promise unkept, why each of the gifts held out with a grin should hold unheard hurts for hand that it finds. And walking, I learned why they smile alike, give cloaks of unseeing, chalices, swords, to make a man king, then wretched, accursed. Both sides of the gift unmakes what it brings. Though women and men know such stories well, of gifts fashioned to consequence dreadful, they never ask cost of wondrous things, would not grasp the meaning should they be warned, not when the glittering thing could be theirs. The danger's in wanting, not us, we say, so we feel absolved, and act out our parts, every line writ on the bellies of stones, before our bones were set in their shapes, to block out the light, and our shadows cast. I say that I've lived an interesting life, as feet rediscover their confidence. Kissed eaters of fire beneath briny piers, danced with blind artists who sketch by their touch, held court with men living as myths, in their shadowed nooks, untroubled by light. The men who take a vengeance with ice and time, their tattoos written to ward off ill fate, and furtive nights, an ancient glade's passion, brotherhoods broken and deftly remade, and everywhere stories heard over cups, across our one land of hidden many. Heel on painted stone or sunken fresh clay, spider a web of iron with dancers below. I've heard no two tales told quite the same. Like breath over cups, old fears are alive, swallowed, sworn beside the old blessings, men muttering pray for gentle rains. Their wives watch wood for Tamburlaine, and at the fringes of their lives suspect peculiar strange folk drink, and travel on the threads that stitch one fabric to the next. Here omission hides the trap, the unseen scattered as leaves. Hide the jagged gleaming jaws. I say what's seen is man outside. Omit that man must be outside. I say nothing of the jeers or persistent desperation, night's itching fear that, perhaps, this time my number's up. This time my luck's run out. This time nothing but the cold. I'll be just what I should have been, a nothing statistic, not a story. Brief shake of caring heads, understanding that nameless tragedy fills every day, so wrong and so sad, but such is the world. These are crimes that irrevocably are. Glad nameless haze, suffering was cut short at the fringes of brief grieving lives. Suspected peculiar, strange folk drink, light cigarettes as remembrances, fire to brighten their vigilant eve, to keep back the dark and its predators. Among the gardens of populous night, emerald mantids devour their young, claws as beautiful as trumpet vines where dregs of kin splash, forgotten and left. I don't tell him that his family lied, that there are dim places, closets, and beds, jaws patiently waiting, gleam below leaves, where hunters coming to maintain their snares are least of dreadfulness of night, still men, where reality holds monsters of childhood fear, that all who dwell in such lives of betweens must struggle, remain one step ahead, one wall apart from the storms of their mind. Ahriman, Azazel, mouths of the wind, your sensibilities gobbled away, eating the heart out of all noble thoughts, chew grotesque mockeries into our flesh, gnawed meat men recognized by no kin. That for lives always near their freezing point, the ice of sentiment too often breaks. A drop, or a slip, or a pressure too long, melts slightly, refreezes, and breaks again. Sometimes into weaker sheets than before, fractures half sealed, unseen and fragile, smooth panes of victim waiting for crime, then nothing, statistic without a story. But sometimes it breaks and reforms, breaks and refreezes into something else, no longer broken, but a different wholeness, a different order or notion of ice, crystalline, with no kinship to water, quenching not the thirsts of men, not thirsting of the living, cooling not the sickness fevers, not fevers fought for living, does not break for sake of weight, nor freeze again compelled by chill, this new character of ice would crack beneath your feet, freeze hard as stones and a belly of lies, a crystal sky above your head indifferent to your fists. Silent, cold, your vision dims, sink into expansive grave, because the lake was hungry. I don't tell him I've seen this many times. Loved men and women lose all that sees love. Minds realigned to malignancy's lines, that he'd used the gun before he knew why. It was in his pocket, smiling and cold. That she'd been dragged off by 4 strong police, slivers of lover's jaw in her knuckle. This girl I'd held as she'd cried out her pride, ready at last to return to her mum. That night, no tears left. Might never again. Not one fear left, no self left to lose. Eyes once like warm chestnuts stared back at me black, gaze dead like a shark's, like volcanic glass, from sudden explosions of fire and stone. I don't say I learned how to properly fear. That then I knew demons of my forebears, that then I knew there were worse things than death, what men without gods would still call unholy. I finally knew what Scott Peck had meant, that people who lie might become something else, a mercy that thankfully, blissfully rare, might stop being people who lie to the world, or to themselves about heart's contents, might make that terrible step where they rip from their chests the trembling of that warm heart, and wedge in the lie to pulse in its place. A dark silent world unfolding within, behind their ribs, looking something like ice. I don't tell him of those I've outlived, that for every kid who became an old player, a prophet, an artist, a voice from beyond, there's 100 laid out on the sidewalk, wrapped in newspaper like market fresh fish, imprisoned for life for the wrongs that they'd done, and all too often for wrongs done to them, or trapped behind walls of minds fracturing, hell houses of mirrors, glass on the floor, or simply faded like dew with the dawn. No echo of them, just pavement they'd worn, in nights of long pacing hustle or hunt for scores to buy them another morning, which nobody promised they'd be there to see. I don't say stones have lies written beneath, but the ruts on their tops tell fuller tales, though few know to look and fewer can read, sidewalk epitaphs of interesting lives. What I didn't tell him, that is the trap, and it has already swallowed us both. And I'll have to wait for another video to read the other poem.